let's not forget that even when Europeans were trying to give credit to Europeans for the ancient Egyptians, they sometimes made the mistake of claiming that random pharaohs were Nubians.
Drawing, which we see here on the right. Not far off from there, of the pyramids, he says, and the colossus doth stand unto the mouth, consisting of the natural rock, as if for such a purpose advanced by nature. The rest of huge flat stones laid thereupon, wrought altogether into the form of an Ethiopian woman, by a sphinx, and he's talking about the great sphinx here, the Egyptians in their hieroglyphics presented an harlot, having an amiable and alluring face, but with all the tyranny and rapacity of a lion, exercised over the poor, heartbroken, and voluntarily perishing lover. So he captured for his audience back home the fact that there was this colossal statue of a sphinx, human headed, with a lion's body, although most of it was buried in his day. He was mistaken in thinking that this was an Ethiopian woman. Of course, we now believe that the human head has the form of the fourth dynasty king Khafra, but nonetheless, it's an amusing little tale that he tells here.
Those were the words of George Sandys, who was born in 1578 and died in 1644. This is before any of the British poets or any of the British adventurers that I wrote about last time. And this is after, just after, let's say 1,000 years after the Greeks. So let's put a timeline down. We got the Greeks, who were born 1,000 years before this guy. They claim that the ancient Egyptians were black, and if you don't believe me, watch my previous videos. We got the British, who claim that the ancient Egyptians were black. They were born 200 years after this guy. And then you have this guy who looks at the Sphinx and he says to himself, that's definitely a black woman. And as you heard, the guy said it was amusing. But the only part that's amusing about it is, why is it that random pharaohs in Egypt are being accused of being black people? Think about it. When has that happened in ancient Greece? At one point, give me an example where they sat down and said that some of the ancient Greeks were black people, where they could even mistake that. It's quite clear that it's impossible to do that when people don't look the same. The reason why, and you will see if I show you the statue of the person who's portrayed in the Sphinx, the reason why they do this is because to them, they wish that the ancient Egyptians are Europeans, but their eyes betray their will, their wants. And so they have to bow down to something that most of them didn't want to back then. All of the people I've shown you, think about it, I've never shown you an Afrocentrist perspective on this channel. I've only shown you people who would most likely disagree with the idea that the ancient Egyptians were black, but their heart compels them. Not because they want it to be true, but because they can't see it any other way. And again, let's sit down for a second and think, why would these Europeans waste their educational lives, throw away their educational reputation to push a black narrative, to push that ancient Egyptians were black, to push that, hey, I saw one and it was black. This guy's throwing away his whole reputation to say this confidently. And keep in mind, this guy was not some great guy or something. This guy was an author, a traveler, a colonist, a poet, a translator. He wasn't exactly, looking to update or uplift black people, but he had no reason to push the narrative of black Africans. And of course, if you think about it, black people at this time had not even joined Egyptology. Remember when I told you that it's a myth that this idea, that's why I never call myself an Afrocentrist or Afrocentrism or any of that, because it is made up. If you group yourself apart from the mainstream, it'll make it seem like it's a group that will never join the mainstream. In real life, there is no separate group. These facts are ideas that were put out by people who existed long before black people were even allowed to look into stuff like this. This debate started before the Afrocentrists joined the conversation. So do not believe these people because they're going to make you feel guilty on the inside. Like, oh, you're black, so you want it to be true. Or you're a black sympathizer and you want it to be true. It is not true. The debate started, like I showed you, with the ancient Greeks. And the debate started with the ancient Greeks because there was so much migration from Greece into Egypt.